recording. Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. I would like to begin our meetings by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I'm currently situated, which is Western Australia. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognize their continuing connection to the land, waters, and culture. We acknowledge the contributions and resilience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people in this region and across the nation. So good evening, good afternoon, good morning from around the world, and welcome to the 38th edition of the ArchiTalk today, where we gather to celebrate the architecture and broader built environment insights. If you're already familiar with the ArchiTalk platform, then I don't need to basically explain further, but for those of you who have joined us for the first time, we have compiled all the recordings of the previous talks on our website, architalk.org. I think I'm really basically passionate to spread the news that we have now also uploaded all the talks on YouTube. Our colleague Hirsch Ramcharitor helped us to do so. Thank you so much, Hirsch, for your kind support. So you can watch that on YouTube as well. The other point I wanted to make is that you can easily share basically the talks via our ArchiTalk platform to your LinkedIn, X, Instagram, etc. So feel free to do so for maybe future occasions. All right, it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers today, Maria Vittoria Delli Carri. Maria Vittoria is trained as an architect and landscape architect and joined Best 8 in 2019. Maria Vittoria specializes in large-scale urban design and landscape projects with a major natural component for both transformative and completely new built areas. Her approach to design is grounded in thorough research into the particulars of a site with a focus on geomorphological systems, and basically her main expertise are vision development and conceptual design. It's great to have you on board, Maria. And today, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I know that it's too early for you, 7:30 a.m. you mentioned, so much appreciated. Hand it over to you. Well, maybe if you want to say hello,
hello everyone. Thank you very much, Parisa, for your introduction, and thank you everyone to be here. I'm very excited to join this ArchiTalk session, so thank you.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I now share the slides. Share file. Okay. There you go.
Yes, nice. Thank you so much. So, good morning again, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to start introducing a little bit what we do and what our firm is. So, I work in West 8. Our firm has over 35 years of experience. It was founded in 1987. And our projects span through different kinds of interventions, including waterfronts, islands, master planning, urban design, parks, botanic gardens, and streetscapes. Okay. So this is our office. This is where I am now, and I would like to tell you a little bit about the philosophy of the office and how we work. So, engineer meets poet is what I think one of the pillars of the philosophy of the office, and it means that our work is based, first of all, in a pragmatic approach and very technical, starting from what is the context, the physical surrounding, what we have as a base for a design, and then expanding into what is the poet. So the beauty, the softscape, and the soft aspects of the design, and iconic landmarks, and enjoyment of the people. We have a multi-disciplinary team. We're about 70 people, which include people from different backgrounds, including landscape architecture, urban design, but also engineers, industrial design, lighting experts, visualizers, and ecologists. And here it's a bit of an overview of the services we offer, just to get an idea. So we start from concept design, spanning through feasibility studies, landscape infrastructure, community engagement, and up to construction, documentation, and administration. Here we see a bit of an overview of the team. So we are about 72 employees spread through 3 different offices. One is here in Rotterdam, where I'm now, which is the main one, but we also have 2 more offices in North America, Philadelphia, and in Belgium. And we are a very international team. We come from over 21 different countries, and we speak in the office more than 15 different languages. We see here all the members of the team in the office. And here is a bit of an overview of what kind of projects we do. So this is an average, but we do mostly master plans and competitions, and also a number of public space design, parks, and streetscapes. And this is to get a bit the feeling of how we work in the office. So we are very hands-on, and we work from the sketch phase through model making and drafting, of course, plans and visuals, up to the selection of materials for the realization of our projects. I would like to explain 4 of the pillars of our design. First of all is ecological sustainability. Of course, we work with nature and with vegetation. So we are very careful about topics like seasonality, renewable energies, risk management, also related to water, for example, and adaptivity and timeless characters. And timeless characters, I would like to stretch this concept a bit more because I find it very interesting, and this applies both to the vegetation and to the hardscape materials. And timeless is one of the aspects that I find really sustainable, because if we understand sustainability as the ability to enjoy a resource without preventing future generations to enjoy it as well, then an eye to a timeless design, which of course will vary in time, but an attention to design something that can be used for a long time allows it to be sustainable. And so we are very careful about also maintenance and the materials quality, and of course the transformation in time of the especially natural elements. Also, connecting identities is very important for us. So many of our projects start in the early phases with the participation process. We involve the local communities, the stakeholders, and we try to realize a design which is considering the point of view of the people that actually live and use the area and the space, and will be the users of the design once it's realized. We do many urban projects. We are involved in many transformations. In many cases, we've had to deal with projects which were transforming an area from a main road infrastructure or train infrastructure to a public space. We see an example here of the Madrid Rio project. And then building with nature, which I find very important. And we have a couple of examples here. So we work to restore ecological and social integrity to the environment, and some projects are born from the very physical elements of their land. We see here the Governor's Island, which with its topography, and the Room for the River project, which was based on the water. To understand a bit more of how we work, I think it's important to understand the Dutchness, so the Dutch culture and their urge to create nature, which is very embedded in the way we work, even internationally. So a few days ago, I ran into these two maps in Instagram, which are a comparison of how the Netherlands looks now and how it will look if it had no dikes. Now, I don't guarantee about the scientific accuracy of this image. I just found it online, but I think it gives pretty much the idea of what we're talking about. Amsterdam would be completely underwater, and also Rotterdam would not be there. And this data corresponds quite well when we look at the government's website and their map of the flood-prone areas. We see that over a half of the territory of the country is floodable, and it's distinguished between the above sea level and below sea level, which is quite extensive. The height of the Netherlands spans between about 300 meters, starting from the lowest point, which is located at minus 7.4 meters below sea level, up to around 300 meters in the south. So it's an extremely flat land. And we see here an image of a typical landscape of the Netherlands. It is flat up to the horizon, capped with clouds quite often, I must say. And we see in different layers the productive and urbanized land, some of the greenhouses, which are today the evolution of a long tradition of agriculture. And in the foreground, the landscape of the polders, organized between dry land and many watercourses. The landscape of the Netherlands responds to what in our office is defined as a second nature, which refers to the built landscape. So the Dutch, to reclaim all this land from the seawater, have had to work their land and build it constantly for centuries. And so the iconic elements of its landscape are actually functional elements, as we see here. It's the canals and also the windmills, which help draining the water and bringing it away to the main courses and then to the sea. This is a view from above of the extremely organized landscape. We see again the dry land, agricultural land with the houses, and the watercourses and the canals. It takes different shapes, but again, we see this very geometrical grid. And this kind of landscape is also represented quite well in the history and in the art of the country. As we can see here, the view over a flat country from 1664 represent a quite similar landscape. So we see a flat land under a coat of clouds and the water dominating the landscape. In a more close-up view from 1870, we see two more elements which are quite distinctive of this landscape. We can perceive the wind blowing through the reeds by the canal here, course, the windmill, and also the productivity of the land, so the livestock farming and the cattle. And this is quite a common element in the representation and in the culture and in the history and in the productivity of the country. We will see how the landscape of this country is extremely pragmatic and productive. So it's mostly divided between agricultural land, built areas, and also livestock farming. And of course, another distinctive element where there is water is, of course, the sailing and the trade. So this is the port of Rotterdam, how it looked in 1856. And we will see in a few slides how it has developed up to today. To intervene in the land in order to reclaim the land from the waters, the Dutch have done many actions through the centuries, and the main one is the realization of the polders. We see here the plan of the first polder that was reclaimed from a lake at the beginning of the 17th century. And the polder system basically consists of draining a lower portion of land by canalizing its water, which accumulates continuously through the inland water and the rainwater, canalizing it to a main canal, from which it is then brought up by usually windmills, but now also pump stations, and then brought to the main canals which run downstream up to the sea. So this is a method to keep the land dry and usable. We can observe also in this plan of Amsterdam in 1770 how the polders are the main characteristic of the landscape and the surroundings of the city. And even in Amsterdam, the traditional image of the city with its brick facades mirrored into the water are actually expression of a very functional need of canalizing and managing the water courses. Of course, this long-lasting fight of the Dutch against water, it's a tough one, and so it hasn't always been won. The Dutch history is dotted by several flood events. And this happened in 1953. It was an extremely strong flood which interested all the south of the country. We see here an image of the dike bridge in Papendrecht, which is a town close to Rotterdam. And here we see a flooded village. When I added this image to the slideshow, I realized, sadly, it felt actually kind of familiar, because even today, with more and more extreme natural events occurring, we see quite often these episodes of entire villages or cities flooded. I'm thinking about Brazil early this year, or Italy last year, but many, many countries and many, many cases all over the world. So the land needs to be maintained constantly. All this work that the Dutch have done on their territory is something in continuous transformation. And for example, here is dredging the water courses by excavating the bottom of the river to extract the sediments and accumulate them, and then releasing back the water. And also part of the constant transformation is also an expansion, which is sometimes still happening. So we see here the port of Rotterdam, which we saw in its representation in the mid-19th century a few slides ago, but now it looks like this. This is the latest expansion right into the sea, and the port today stretches over 40 kilometers along the river, the Maas River, from the city, which is a bit back there, up to the sea. To look at it a bit from afar, we see its extension. The port of Rotterdam is today the largest port in Europe, and it stretches into the sea here from the city center, which is located around here. And to take a look at the context where it's located, we see that this area is very wet and it's crossed by many watercourses. This is in fact the delta of the Rhine and the Maas. So in Europe here we study in primary school how the Rhine and the Danube are the main rivers in Europe. And we can have a perception of this by understanding how the Rhine starts way south in Switzerland and crosses 5 different countries and accumulates also rainwater and secondary courses from 5 different countries before discharging here in the Netherlands. So this delta is interested by a very large amount of water constantly. If we get a bit closer to what the landscape looks like, we can see also from above a bit of this functional, productive, pragmatic landscape, very green, but characterized mostly by agricultural land and built areas. And we will focus here in a moment because this fight against the water, which has lasted for centuries, after the floods of 1953, which we've seen in the pictures, took a bit of a turn when the government of the Netherlands decided to realize the Delta Works, which is a system of dikes and of storm surge barriers located all around the delta in order to protect its land. But then the water again seriously challenged these defensive systems at the end of in the mid-90s, between 1993 and 1995. And that is when the Dutch government decided to take a step back in this fight. So rather than continually adding to the height of their dikes, the Dutch are now affording water more space, making room for rivers. And this is the very name of the project, Room for the River, which was started around 2006 and completed in 2015. It's spread through most of the country and divided in 30 different projects. We will be focusing on the one realized by Weststate in this area in the delta. We recognize here the delta that we were looking at before. Zooming in, we identify this as the project site, and its context is the end of Dordrecht and Papendrecht. Papendrecht is where we saw the dike breach in 1953, so an area that has been historically interested by strong floods. In the south, we have the National Park of the Biesbosch, and about 10 kilometers upstream, we meet the town of Gorinchem, which is one of the reasons why this project was done in the first place. The need, in fact, was to lower the water level in Gorinchem by about 30 centimeters by discharging the water on a wider surface a bit downstream over here. To intervene in this area and let the water take its space, we elaborated a design vision which is based on 5 main elements. So first of all, visibility and accessibility to this unique drainage landscape, also based on safety and water management, of course. And this would be the most, as if we think back of about the engineer meets poet point of view, this is a quite clear demonstration of this approach, because we start from water management, safety, and very pragmatic functions, but also expand into what's the poet in a way, through the education about the history and water management, the recreation and tourism, and then creating a wide ecological area for people to enjoy. And second point is the inspiration from a pragmatic tradition, which, as I mentioned, is starting from considering the land, its conditions, and the needs of the residents and its entrepreneurs. Third element is the construction and construction methodology. So, of course, to realize this kind of project, a lot of engineering and architectural interventions, mostly about infrastructure, are needed. So the area is characterized by what we call the water management architecture, which has a quite strong identity in the Netherlands, and it's made by especially dikes and roads and bridges. Another point was to give identity to this area by connecting to its history. And this is done through the use of materials, so which were mostly bronze and bricks, which are materials which are widely found in the area as for constructions. So the bronze is what characterized the fencing, balustrade, letters, and decorative elements, while the bricks are cladding, the pumping stations that we will see in a bit, and those are actually recycled bricks which were reused from the homes which had to be taken down for the realization of this project, and we will touch this topic also in a bit. Last element, but not least, of course, is the natural environment. So we proposed a design that would offer an unprecedented value for a new nature with a varied habitat characterized by floodability and inundation. This sequence explains pretty well what is the core of the design for the area. So we recognized our project area and the main water courses, which is a branch of the Rhine River running in the north. And this is quite a regular condition. So there is a landscape of the polders, dry portions of land crossed by smaller water courses, which then merge into what is the wet area of the Biesbosch National Park in the south. And this condition stays up to 70 centimeter of water level rise. When the water rises a bit more, up to 120 centimeter, it flows into this area, which is a bit lower than the rest, and which is the intertidal ecological area, which can be then flooded, but then preserves what is the agricultural land and the livestock farming area. With a further raise of the water level up to 135 centimeters, the water also floods what is the livestock farming area, which is one that can be quickly regenerated and still preserves the agricultural land. In a case of 1 in 100 years, the water can raise up to 200 centimeters. In that case, it would cross the dike in this point, and the design considered a lowering of about 3 meters of the dike through an extension of 2 kilometers to let the water flow in. And so the water course starts flowing in this direction. and up to 240 centimeters, we see it starts also to flood some of the smaller agricultural portions. And then in a case of 1 in 1,000 years, which is the most extreme scenario that we designed for, the water level rises up to 290 centimeters, and the whole land is flooded, and the whole agricultural area is flooded. But still we see how the houses are still protected. And also there is an escape route, which is above flooding level, which allows people to leave their land in case of necessity. This was very much needed because, as we see, the previous condition was this. There were already floods, so this area was flooding. It's not like it was sacrificed out of nowhere. And but it was creating way more damage because it was flooding indistinctly the whole surface, affecting the agriculture, causing erosion, and also cutting off connection routes and isolating people. We see here a bit more of a close-up of what were the interventions that characterized this main strategy. So we recognized again the intertidal ecological area here, the livestock farming area, the agricultural land, some of the main road connections, and the houses and farms located in the area. Here is the humid area, which is connecting to the Biesbosch National Park. And then two areas which are destined to recreational purposes. This one locates in the context of the national park, so it has a museum of the park, and also offers a number of activities to enjoy the landscape of the park, like boat rental and cycle routes. On the opposite side, we see the location of the existing fort, which is the last of a whole system which spreads through the whole country in the Netherlands, which is an historical landmark, and it also has to deal with water because it is part of a defensive system which was made by the Dutch, and they would open, in case of emergency, the dikes and flood their land to stop the incursions of enemies. This was last used in World War II, when the whole land was flooded to stop the advance of the Germans. And it proved effective because in the whole flooded and muddy lands, the enemies would have a very difficult time crossing. These are some of the more punctual interventions which are realized to make this whole functional distribution effective. So we see a number of bridges, and we see the opening of some new creeks to connect all the water. And then we also see the pumping stations for the dike and for the polder, 3 of which were designated to become also viewpoints to observe this very flat landscape from a bit of a higher point, so to offer a new point of view to the area. Also, the path system was extended on the edges and even inside the intertidal area in order to let people enjoy this landscape both with the low and high water tide. Also, to zoom in a bit into some specific interventions, we can see here a diagram of how the dike was lowered by 3 meters, as I was mentioning, around this area. But still, the housing and the main connections were preserved at a higher level. This was a very important topic for the project because, of course, as I was saying at the beginning, we started with a participation process. And clearly, the people were not happy about the the perspective of their land being changed and having to leave it. So they fought quite strongly against the project. And so one of the main achievements of this design is that we could allow people to stay if they wanted to. Out of a number of houses that were present in the area, some people decided to leave with the compensation, of course, but some people decided to stay, also guaranteeing a continuity in the productivity and the people living in the area. And they were granted the possibilities to stay by demolishing their houses and rebuilding them on a higher level. Also, we see for the fort that I was showing up here in the northeast corner, how another innovative strategy was applied, which was this dike, which could be built a bit lower, about 60 centimeters lower than what it would be needed normally to allow more space to the historical landmark. And this was obtained by realizing a linear forest on the outside of the dike, which would act as a break wave, and so lowering the intensity of the water hitting the dike. Other punctual interventions were, of course, the infrastructure elements. So we had to design a number of bridges and dikes and the pumping stations. And this is what it looks like once realized. So we can observe again the flatland dominated by water and the small topography and like curvature given by the bridge. We can see also the works around the houses, the excavation of the creeks, but also an explanation of the interventions on the houses, which would be protected on a higher slope by adding a portion of soil and reconstructing them on top of it so that they would be safe in even the worst case scenario of a flood of 290 centimeters. This is one of the pumping stations and viewpoint. So it is cladded, as we saw, with the bricks from some of the demolished houses. And also on its surface, there are numbers which mark the height of the water. And we see here a first perception of this second nature. So this landscape, this portion of the territory, which was deeply engineered and acted upon, with time transformed in what looks like a natural landscape. So nature took its space in it. And we see the grassland. It was needed to have a large extension of low grass species because priority, of course, was given to the flow of water, so the water could not be obstructed by higher species, especially in the central portion of the area. And then we see the cows, the cattle, and the houses integrated in the landscape, although a bit raised by the canal. So we find again all the elements of this Dutch landscape. We see also the meandering canals through some more natural area. And then some more punctual element. We realize these, let's say, sculptural elements, which are bronze branches, which were meant as a functional decoration. So they are located along some of the bridges, and they're meant to offer birds a resting spot in case of floods where the water covers the whole land and birds may not find a place to rest for quite a while. Here we have a view from the southwest portion of the area. So this is the end of the Biesbosch National Park, and it's a normally humid surface, the main river. And we see in this portion how the agricultural land is a bit raised and dry in normal conditions. In the 9 years this project has been completed and realized since 2015 up to today, it has proven functional several times, and we're proud to show this. This was a flood which occurred in 2020, but there has been more in 2023, last December. And we see how it actually works. So the whole land is covered by water, but still we see the houses which are protected and dry, as well as the main escape route, which allows people to live while the secondary connections might be flooded. Here is another view over one of the main road connections, stayed dry, and of course the water could flow through it thanks to the bridges. And we see again in the secondary routes how maybe the road might be flooded, but then the infrastructure, the bridges are protected and raised above the water level. A few months after, in the summer of 2020, nature came back. So after all the water covering the entire portion of land, this is when it dried up, and we see the grassland is coming back and it's blossoming beautifully. And all the users are coming back. So we have the vegetation, but then the animals are back, and the bikers and the people doing boat tours are also back in this renewed and beautiful landscape. Also, the cattle is back and the birds. So once again, the natural landscape is restored and functional. We see the cows resting under the trees. An overview of the agricultural land, the main infrastructure, and the more humid areas. And then people using also the recreational routes along the canals. And this is an overview of how the second nature then came back once again. And I wanted to propose you this specific project because, of course, the Netherlands lives a very particular condition, being under seawater level. So they've had to deal with this for centuries, and this is a matter of survival for them. So they're very well used and trained to deal with their landscape and the water. But then, as we know, so these conditions of flood and extreme natural events are interesting more and more different countries and different landscape in the world. So I wanted to show how important it is sometimes to give space to nature, not only for an aesthetic and ecological purpose, but also for very practical reasons like saving money and human lives. The worst case scenario elaborated by the central government in the Netherlands for extreme flood events accounts for 163 billion euros of damages and over 1,000 possible deaths. While these interventions, the Room for the River project with its 30 interventions overall costed about 2.3 billion euros. And these allow to preserve the landscape, to reduce the expense in case of extreme events, and save people's life. So I would like to propose this as a maybe inspiration for what could be a type of intervention also in different areas. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was fascinating. It was great to hear all your insights about the second nature and all that interesting project. I think you beautifully showed us how human intervention and natural processes can coexist. I guess a big reminder for all of us that climate change is not just a future threat, it's already here, a reality before us. So thanks for sharing that project with us. I would like to open it to the audience. If anyone has any question, you can either type or turn on your mic and ask questions. You already have a thank you message from Justin. It says thank you.
Yeah, I saw. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Justin, would you like to turn on your mic? You have a question.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I don't mean to sort of always try and be the first one to ask a question. It's probably just because of verbal diarrhea or something. That was really fascinating, Maria. Thank you very much. And it's really interesting to see. I don't know Holland quite as well in any way as parts of low-lying levels of England, such as the East Anglia, where flooding has also been a historical problem. But having spoken recently with some ecologists in Australia who seem to spend their life in sort of constant depression at the moment about the impacts of sort of systemic stressor factors in landscapes, is that something that you're coming across as well?
Sorry, missed the part. Systemic what?
Sort of stress factors, so not just increasing heat, but increasing sort of heat then leads to increasing vulnerability of species to invasive disease or that kind of thing, something we're seeing in parts of Western Australia.
So the heat is indeed influencing the landscape. I attended a lecture a while ago, which was talking about this changing vegetation here, because some of the species that were historically growing in this area are now dying, and there is happening something that usually happens, which is migrating of species, in this case northwards. But then in this case, it's happening extremely fast, so nature cannot recover quickly enough to keep up with the pace of climate change. So one of the big questions here in the Netherlands is how to help nature adapt to this. Because of course, as I was showing, Dutch people are very used to act on their nature, program their nature. And so they're now questioning themselves on how to also overcome these changes which are happening. And there's a whole debate between people who are still preferring the use of local and indigenous species, because they, of course, well adapt to the area. But some other people suggest it would be appropriate to introduce some other species which come from southern and warmer lands and let them adapt to the context in order to be future-proof.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually, because that was part of the discussion I was having with these ecologists, which was around that sort of that tension between local indigenous species and what the likely change will be and the impact on those species as opposed to ones which are more hardy to the new conditions. But something I always thought about Holland and it was made very clear in your talk, was how a lot of this kind of vital water management infrastructure is kind of semi-invisible. But it has the ability to act as a kind of, I don't like using the word, but a sort of geoengineering to prepare for a future that is potentially coming.
Yeah, indeed. And it's partially invisible, but partially also very visible, because if you drive along the coast, you see all the storm surge barriers and the dikes. So
Yeah.
it's a very consistent character of the landscape here.
Mm. Thank you. It was really fascinating. Really cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Justin. Anyone else has any questions? I might ask one. Maria, you already basically addressed part of this question, but I wonder what are the biggest challenges you have encountered in implementing such large scale kind of water management projects?
You referred to this one in particular, I guess, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So of course, the water management is a quite complex topic, because water is not really controllable completely. So this kind of intervention needed very accurate calculations about the water levels and how it could flood the land, in order to guarantee that the farming lands and the housing would stay dry, and also this sequence of floodable surfaces, as we saw in the plans. And of course, another topic that I started raising was that of the local inhabitants, because of course they were there before the intervention. So even though this area has gone through many transformations in history, it was very important to listen to their point of view and how the project could be realized, also taking into account their need to be there.
Definitely, because there might be, and as I saw, a few like housing while you actually implement the projects around. So how would your, how implementation of your ideas impact, those communities, etc. I guess it's just a very kind of extensive and intricate process.
It is indeed, and it goes through several phases, and it's back and forth communication. It's not like we go there and communicate, we're going to do that, but it needs different rounds of feedback and participation and workshops. And the topic of affecting local communities goes on two different parts of the local community, because of course there were the farmers on the land, which had to be listened to. But also, if we remember upstream the town of Gorinchem, they were also affected by the project in the way that the municipality could avoid, thanks to the realization of this project, they could avoid realizing even more defensive systems to protect their city and their people from higher level surge of water. Yeah.
Yes, very interesting. All right, thank you so much. Is there any other questions, or we can perhaps close the session? Yes, thank you so much, Maria. We really appreciate your time. It's
Thank you.
early
I was
morning
very
over
happy
there,
to join.
but fantastic. Thank you. We have recorded the session. I'll send you the link in case you would need that. And lots of thank you messages for you in the chat as well.
Thank you so much.